Secretary Mayorkas sat at that table and told this committee the border is secure. 8 to 10 million people entered our country in a 4-year time illegally, record levels of fentanyl smuggled in, stories of women and children being harmed and abused, and we all remember what we saw. Whether it was the bridge in Del Rio, all the thousands of people waiting to be processed there when we took trips to McAllen. I mean, we all remember what we saw. Agents had become processors and chauffeurs for the Biden administration's open border policy. And Secretary Mayorkas told this committee in that same chair that Secretary Noem sits in now that the border is secure. It reminds me of that now somewhat famous moment on television where the CNN reporter is standing in front of the burning building and saying, it's a mostly peaceful protest. I mean, it was just ridiculous what the secretary said. And Secretary Mayorkas didn't stop there. Remember when he went after Border Patrol agents, said they were horsewhipping migrants trying to come in? Remember that just completely made up story? Remember when we asked Secretary Mayorkas how many illegals, again, sat right in this committee here, and we asked him, how many illegals on the terrorist watch list have been released into the U.S.? How many have been released into the country? Anyone remember his response? I don't know. And we're like, man, you're the Secretary of Homeland Security. That's probably something you should know, particularly when you come in front of the Judiciary Committee and we ask you that question. Remember when days before a hearing, subsequent hearing, because we got tired of the I don't know response from Secretary Mayorkas, we with questions we were going to ask him, so he couldn't say I don't know. Basically like the professor giving the students here's the exam, here's the questions on the exam, be prepared to deal with these at the appropriate time. When he got to committee, we asked him those questions, and again he said, I don't know, I'll have to get back with you. And of course, he never did get back with us. Remember when Secretary Mayorkas wrote the memo, the Mayorkas memo? Aliens removable under the Immigration Nationality Act. He said the Immigration Nationality Act should not alone be the basis of an enforcement action. Really? The law shouldn't be the basis for an enforcement action? It should be something else? It should be your memo? That was exactly the policy. A whole new standard the last administration set. They let people in, a whole new standard of how you were going to deal with people who were in violation of federal law. And remember when Secretary Mayorkas went even further. He did the Protected Areas Memorandum. In this situation, when you're trying to follow federal law, trying to enforce federal law, he said you can't apprehend an illegal migrant, maybe one who's been charged with another crime and been released in a sanctuary jurisdiction, something I know some of these angel families know something about, been released in a sanctuary jurisdiction, you could only apprehend them at certain locations. So in other words, think about it. It says, in or near certain protected areas, you should not apprehend an illegal migrant. A school, preschool, primary school, secondary school, place of worship, place where children gather, such as a playground, recreation center, all these restrictions on law enforcement being able to enforce federal law. So think about it. Some sanctuary jurisdiction, illegal migrants been charged with another crime, maybe a crime abusing children, is released because the detainer is not honored, he's not turned over to ICE, is released to the streets. You're not allowed to go get a guy who's been charged with harming kids if he's near a school, if he's near kids. That was how ridiculous everything was in the last administration. But here's the good news. Secretary Noem has rescinded the Mayorkas memo, has rescinded the Protected Areas memo. Under Secretary Noem, fentanyl coming into the country is down, women and children are safer, and most importantly, under Secretary Noem and President Trump's leadership, the border is secure. Remember that moment? We all remember the great speech the president gave last week at the State of the Union, but the joint address he gave the year before, one of the best lines I remember with that address was he said, you know, people said you need a new legislation to secure the border. Turned out all you need was a new president. Remember that line? It's true. New president with the secretary who was doing her job. In 1 year's time, 700 people have been deported under Secretary Noem's leadership. Nearly 3 million people have left the country. 1,400 known or suspected terrorists have been arrested. Not Secretary Mayorkas telling, I don't know. the status of people we've encountered on the border on the terrorist watch list. It's an amazing record, Madam Secretary, but there's still one big problem. Oh, one other thing. Another thing that's not going on at the Department of Homeland Security now, no more disinformation governance board. No more bureaucrats on a board telling Americans what they can say, what they can tweet, what they can read, what they can post. No more censorship going on at the Department of Homeland Security. But there is still one big problem. And I know the Secretary wants to deal with this, and we're going to deal with this tomorrow with legislation that we plan to mark up in this committee, and that is the sanctuary jurisdiction policies that are happening all over the country. Left-wing political officials in state and local government telling their local law enforcement, do not work with federal law enforcement when it comes to enforcing federal law. 1/3 of the country, almost 1/3 of the country lives in the sanctuary jurisdiction. 18 cities, 11 states, 3 counties, District of Columbia, but they're big population areas. 31.5% of the country lives in a jurisdiction where that is the policy. That may be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And we talked about this individual case last week. Abraham Gonzalez, September 20th, 2023, is arrested by Border Patrol for illegally entering the country. Of course, the Biden administration released him. 5 months later, he's charged with assault. 2 weeks after that, he's charged with motor vehicle theft. He stole a car. He's arrested by Denver police. 9 days later, placed in the Denver Justice Center. 6 days after that, ICE sends a detainer notice to the Denver Justice Center. And all the detainer notice is give us a heads up if you're going to let this guy out. Just up. But instead of doing the common sense thing, in Denver, sanctuary jurisdiction, they give the federal government the finger and they release them to the streets. Release them to the streets. It's right here on the form. Denver Sheriff Department ICE notification being released to the streets on 28, 2025. And here's what's interesting. This guy, they knew how bad he was because while he was in the Denver Justice Center, they have on the form, he's been violent to staff, keep him separate from all other inmates. So he's so dangerous, staff can't be around him, other inmates can't be around him, but they're going to release him to the streets instead of turning him over to ICE. Again, dumbest policy I have ever heard, but that is what the left now fully embraces. Let me give you a more recent example. Marvin Morales Ortiz. This is just next door, Fairfax County, Virginia. Detainer is sent, but the Fairfield County Justice Center says we will not honor the detainer. They tell him that on September 14th, 2025. They release Mr. Ortiz on December 18th, 2025. The next day, he kills an American. Next day, he kills an individual, murders someone. That is what happens in sanctuary jurisdiction. That is why tomorrow help is on the way because we're going to mark up legislation that will deal with this. And I think I believe it will pass our committee. I believe it will pass the House. We'll get it to the. I want this to become law. I think most people with common sense want it to become law. The Shutdown Sanctuary Policies Act. Give the people. One thing in our bill that we're going to have in the bill tomorrow too. Be in the legislation, it will give the people behind you where that scenario is played out, your loved one has been harmed by someone who should have been turned over but was released, give you a private right of action for these angel families. Private right of action where you can go after the government who engaged in that stupid behavior. So, Secretary, I want to thank you for your work. I want to thank you for being willing to come today and answer our questions. And with that, I will yield to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, for his